Hello there, you're welcome again to my YouTube channel. This is going to be another highly informative video under the same playlist. If you want to catch up on the previous episodes, you will just have to click on the link showing above this video right now. It will take you to the previous video. So just so that is if you are new, by the way, on this page. So today we're going to be treating one of those question type. I have mentioned earlier in the previous videos that there are some question types that require you to not read just as much detail, right? Today we're going to be looking at just one of them, which happens to be the specific detail question type. Now, I find that students fail this question, not all the time though, because it doesn't even occur as frequently as the other question type. But students still miss this question, not because they cannot spot details in the text, but because they are approaching it just the same way as they would typically approach other questions. Now, this question requires specific approach. Now, in this video, we're going to be treating those specific approach just so whenever you have the question, when you do have the question, you get to give the best answer to it. And we will not be learning one thing on this video, right? We'll be taking a walk through a sample question on how to know when the question is dictating a specific detail approach, and of course how to quickly scan the text and just spot the answer. And finally, we're going to also be looking at what characterizes the wrong answer. So sometimes you can see certain wrong answers in the text. Yes, the information on that wrong answer can be found in the text somewhere, in some way, but that is not the right answer. It is obviously a wrong answer, right? And you fall into the trap of choosing such answers when you don't read the text the right way as dictated by the specific detail question type. So you want to stick around here with me and let me help you deal with this question type very, very easily. So let's quickly dive into the questions I will be walking you through. And today I happen to just feel a little bit more generous than normal. So I'm going to be looking at two questions, two different kinds of questions. Remember, in one of the previous videos, I stated that certain texts are drawn from literary passages. And by that, I mean poems or novels, right? And you could tell from the blurb. And then other texts are just drawn from the core sciences. I'm talking about biological sciences, environmental sciences, and sometimes social sciences. So we're going to be looking at one passage from the biological sciences, and we're going to be looking at one passage from a literary excerpt, right? And just how to deal with these question type on those different kinds of passages, right? So yes, we're going to first of all begin by trying to understand what characterizes the specific detail question. How does the question come? So you want to, of course, look at the question quickly. So the question shown on your screen right now is the question we're working with. We're working with the question from the biological sciences, an excerpt from the biological science article. So yes, let's spot the question, right? So in this question, what we have here says, look at the question according to the text. So that is one phrase you should look out for to let you know you're dealing with specific detail question type. It often comes with according to the text, right? So what I've seen that I know, oh, my answer should be something just mentioned somewhere in the text. Now, the question would often come with keywords, and those keywords sometimes are rephrased in the passage, or a lot of times you could be lucky to find the keywords mentioned the precise way you have them in the question, but don't always find it to be like that, or don't always expect it to be like that, rather on the tricky options, on the tricky kind of questions, and I mean the ones that occur in your second module, right? So always keep an open mind for when the test maybe you just want to be particularly difficult to deal with. So on this particular question, we have here, according to the text, why was Wang and his team's discovery of you don't have to kill yourself pronouncing these difficult words, especially because they waste your time, right? So this thing, you can just morph it into acronyms. You could call it TX fossil. So I'll call it, let's call it, so whenever we find this in the text, we will describe it as TX fossil. So Wang and his team's discovery of TX fossil significant. Now, these is our keywords. Why was this thing significant? So I'm going to scan the text now, which is the next step to dealing with this question, right? I'm going to look at the text in search of this scientific jargon, TX fossil, and why the text says it was significant based on the discovery, right? So we'll dive right into the text. You want to scan through the text and look for anything that's mentioned: significance, importance, crucial. Those are certain word choices that could be used to rephrase that word significant, right? So from the beginning, I have for many years the only existing fossil I've seen that word fossil evidence of Mixopterids, an extinct family of whatever, came from 4 species. So for many years, they have seen this particular species from a certain kind of continent, from the paleocontinent of Laurasia. So I'm seeing something that is pointing to that scientific jargon, but I've not seen it precisely. But what I've seen from here is that for many years they have found a certain kind of species in a certain kind of geographical location. Now, in a discovery, we've seen some of our keywords, right? In a discovery that expands our understanding. Remember, the question says, why was the study significant? And I wasn't particularly expecting that they would mention discovery was significant because that would be too puerile. So they are mentioning it in a rephrased form like this now. And they were even generous enough to help us with one word that mentions that is mentioned the same way in the text. In a discovery that expands our understanding of the geographical location or geographical distribution of Mixopteris. Oh, obviously, we have seen what we're looking for. I don't know about you, but I think I've seen my answer. This study is significant because it expands the understanding of geographical location. Mind you, the first sentence stated that this particular species used to be found in a particular place. Now we find that the study expands, which points to significant, like I said earlier, expands understanding of geographical distribution. So I'm thinking my answer will be something that sounds like this study is significant because it has made us now know that there is it has expanded our knowledge of where this particular species can be found. That's what I'm thinking. Let's read some more to just clarify that prediction I made already. So paleontologist Bowang and his team identified. So we've seen the words of the researchers as mentioned in the question, which points to we're going to have more information about that answer I've already seen. And how others have identified fossil remains of a new. So there's a new Mixopteris. Oh, look at that particularly difficult jargon we couldn't pronounce. TX that lived over 400 million years ago on the paleocontinent of Gondwana. So obviously my answer still makes sense. So they found these species in the Mixopteris family in Gondwana. Remember, the answer I spotted earlier stated that this study expands understanding about geographical location. And see, there was no contrast. So the text simply went on to justify that detail by telling you that they found a particular new species under the Mixopteris family found in Gondwana. And Gondwana is obviously a different location than Laurasia. Now, explaining this took some time, right? But dealing with it on your own subconsciously shouldn't take as much time, because if you are able to tell what the question is looking for, and you should be able to expect rephrasals. I keep saying that. And sometimes you could be lucky to have the same words mentioned, just like we have the word discovery and we have the sometimes they don't even they never always they never even have to change the scientific jargon a lot of times. So now that we have our answer simply says this study is significant. Why? Because it has expanded understanding about the location of this particular species. Now moving on to the options. Option A gives us the fossil constitutes the first evidence found that Mixopteris lived more than known. The year during which the number of years Mixopteris have existed is not the point of the text. That is not the point of the question. Even though we tend to find something pointing to that at the end, which was something I mentioned earlier in the introductory section of this video, that you would often find some wrong answers that are mentioned in the text in some way, but not precise the right answer. So this information about 400 million years ago existence of Mixopterids, right, is not the question. The question was asking us why the study is significant, and we have it right around the keyword there, that is significant because it has expanded knowledge of geographical location, not expand knowledge about the years during which this particular species has existed. So B, the fossil helps establish that meteorites are more closely related to modern Arache. This is totally off. C, the fossil helps establish a more accurate timeline. This is also wrong. The timeline is not why the study is significant. Remember, I keep mentioning the words we saw. The study expands understanding about what? Geographical location. D, the fossil constitutes the first evidence found by scientists that meteorites exist outside Laurasia. Beautiful. By mentioning existence outside, oh, it is pointed to location already, which makes it a brilliant answer already. And of course, we can find it justified in the passage because the passage initially started by mentioning that they used to find this particular species in Laurasia, right? And the study is now significant because that expanded understanding about geographical location. Now, saying that this evidence points to something about the species found outside Laurasia is a perfect rephrasal of the details in the text. So we can more or less match up each option here. Existence outside points to paleocontinent of Gondwana, right? First evidence, we can also find that. Let's see whether we can find that word. In a discovery that expands our understanding of geographical location, then we'll have Bowanga identified fossil remains of a new first evidence. So we see that word rephrased too in the text. So you see, that is just about that for the best answer. And you saw how the other options were wrong. Now, once you're able to determine the keywords and you can find details around the keywords, I mean, it is very easy to eliminate other options that mention strange elements. Even though sometimes they could mention something in the text, just be sure that that something it is mentioned around the keywords we're looking for. Right? Now, moving on to the next. Okay, now let's practice with a second question from a literary excerpt. This comes with a blurb, and a lot of times, of course, from the specific detail question type, because your question is sort of streamlined to a particular portion of the text, you may not need to look at the blurb. You look at the blurb on the main idea question. You want to refer to the video on main idea question to understand how important the blurb is to helping you get main idea answer. But you often don't find that the blurb is very important for this question. However, just so we are sure what kind of passage we're looking at, we may need to just look at the blurb. It is an excerpt from a poem by Ezra Pound, and it is hymn 3, based on the work of Marcantonio Flamino. So yes, it's a poem. That is the only important detail we have seen from the blurb. I don't think that will really help us get the answer. Now the question straight up, first, based on the text, the previous sample we worked with said according to the text. So based on the text, another way to spot this answer. I think it's the same way. It's just a rephrase of according to the text, but I mean, they are saying the same thing more or less. So based on the text, in what way is the human mind like a flower? So our keywords again, human mind, there's a comparison between the human mind and flower. So we want to see in what way does the text say the human mind is like. In other words, in what way is the human mind similar to a flower? In what way does the human mind resemble a flower? So you see what I often do, right? I try to understand the keywords and put it in my own words. Try to rephrase it so that in whatever form it appears in the text, I can still figure it out. So we have from the beginning, as a fragile and lovely flower. So we've seen the first keyword, the flower is fragile and lovely, unfolds its gleaming foliage on the breast of the fostering earth, if the dew and the rain draw it forth. Now, there's one thing about literary passages, you have to understand, you have to get an idea of the story. You don't take the words verbatim, right? You understand what is going on. And sometimes, even if you may need to read off non-essentials, if that could help. We don't have any non-essential here. It is just a sentence, a straightforward sentence, but then it is literary, it is figurative. So let's take some time to understand that. The flower unfolds is gleaming fall. That the flower is vibrant, it is opening up. That is what I can see from there. Then if the dew and rain draw it forth, so when there is dew and rain on it, it opens off its foliage. So I get that point. Now the flower tends to be gleaming, it opens up its foliage when rain falls on it. And we have as a, so by that as that subordinate conjunction there, as we're already indicating of, or we're already being told that there is something coming through, which could be possibly what? A comparison, right? So moving on, we now have, so doth my tender mind flourish if it be fed with the sweet dew of the fostering spirit. So we're looking for human mind. So we have my tender mind, which points to a human speaker. Yes, and we see the word mind also mentioned this. So just like the flower unfolds its foliage when rain falls on it, so doth the mind of the speaker here, when fed with sweet dew of fostering spirit, flourishes. Lacking this, it beginneth straightway to languish, even as the flowerets born upon dry earth, if the dew and the rain tend it not. So the comparison here is pretty easy. The comparison is that the flower tends to unfold its foliage. The flower tends to become a little more vibrant when rain falls on it. In the same way, the human mind flourishes if fed with a sweet dew of the fostering spirit. So my answer will be something as simple as that the human mind tends to flourish like the flower when it is fed by something that nourishes it. In this sense, yeah, in this the metaphoric use of the rain here to be that something that nourishes it. So I think we have our answer. Let's go to the options now and eliminate options that don't come close to that prediction, as well as options that could be mentioned somewhere but not precisely our answer because they are away from what the keywords is asking us to get. So it becomes increasingly vigorous with the passage of time. Okay, so I get that that the human mind, it becomes vigorous. That idea of flourishing could point, but see, there's a detail with the passage of time. The idea of time passing with the human mind, we don't see that, so you can't see that. So this is the kind of answer I like to call half true, half wrong. So it points that the human mind becomes flourishing, which points to that idea of vigorous, but we don't have the other details, so be careful of such answers. It draws strength from changes in the weather. This takes the text quite literally. Yes, this data is quite literally. Be careful of answer, which is why I was interested from the very beginning to deal with a literary text, right? So that you know that there are certain options on the literary text you want to note that take the text quite literally. The weather here, the use of the weather here is quite metaphoric. It's not literal. So talking about changes in the weather, in fact, and we don't have certain kind of changes in the weather. We only have the weather of rain, the metaphor of rain. So even when you're walking, even when we assume that the text wants to be, that the answer wants to be um, verbatim, it wants to use the precise words in the passage, right? This is even wrong on that note because it is changes in weather. And what we have is that, okay, there's changes, by the way. We have the idea of the rain tending it not, which points that, okay, there is a rainy season and, of course, the season that the rain doesn't fall. But then this takes the text too literally. I think that is the detail about this kind of wrong answer that you should look out for. Don't expect that your answer, in fact, when your answers in a literary passage, right, is like this, and we looked at how to spot it. When you find that it's a poem or a novel excerpt, yes, this is taking the text to literary. So we just push this to one side. It requires proper nourishment in order. So you see, this takes the text, the figurative way the text comes. So the idea of the rain and the dew falling on the mind, just like the flower here, points to nourishment, right? Yes, this is perfect because it matches our prediction, and of course, because we understood the figurative bent of the passage. It preserves despite challenging circumstances. We don't have challenging circumstances. And the idea of preserving, that means the mind for withstanding any sort of negative circumstance around it, is not what we have there. What we have there is rather the case of the mind flourishing like the flower. So you see, challenging circumstance is very negative, and the text does not come on that negative note, especially around the portions that have to do with our keywords. The portions closer to our keywords is not negative. We have that negative intonation towards the end. When we have already seen our answer earlier, our answer started from the first sentence, right? Although the whole text is one sentence, but our answers obviously ended on fostering spirit. You see that? Yes. So you see, I think we are down to our best answer, which is option C. The others are either half true, half wrong, as in the case of option A. Option B, take the test too literally. So when working with figurative passages, when working with literary excerpts from poems, novels, you need to be careful of answers that take the precise words in the passage just to trick you, right? Because they are not the normal passages. So you don't treat them like the normal passages. You understand the story behind the word choices. You don't take options that just use the precise words in the past. Those options are very tricky. And of course, the right answer, the option D, is quite off context. It is very negative. The text is not expressed in that negative tone, especially around our keywords. So I really hope this has been a very, very helpful lesson. And as I would always say, take as many practice as you can get your hands on. There is Khan Academy, there is the Blue Book app, and of course, you can get access to my textbook. How can you get my textbook? It's not a textbook, it's a workbook that has a compilation of several questions from the different question types we have on the verbal section of the test, right? A very, not relatively voluminous book, but it has a wealth of information, a wealth of questions to help you with, especially very difficult questions, so that once you get very conversant with working on difficult questions, you find that the actual test, you just glide through. Just glide to the actual test like a champion. So yes, to gain access to that practice compilation, right, you want to click on the link on the description to my site, chigozie.com, and place your order for the book, and you get it right at your doorstep, right? So I hope this is very helpful. Practice, and I wish you the very best on the test. Good luck.